Formula Access. Today, we have our first American Formula One guest on the show. Today, we have Shergul Arshad of Aston Martin F1. He is the head of North America for the team, and he is tasked with partnerships, sponsorships, fan engagement, and all things related to North America, Canada, the US, South America. You guys, he is really smart. I bonded with him immediately over just the commercial conversation of what he does, what is happening in Formula One in the US. You guys enjoy. Aston Martin is by far one of the, I don't want to say most aggressive, but most interested in you as a fan and connecting with you as an audience and allowing you into the team, into the sport, and into its people so that you have a better understanding and education of the sport and the brand itself. You guys, all of our guests from this team are very special, and please welcome Shergul. Formula Access. I have an extremely exciting guest today. I told you I would bring the people of motorsports to your doorstep. And today, this is our first US guest. This guest is firmly committed to the US. He's from Aston Martin. We have Shergul Arshad from Aston Martin F1. He is new to his role. He responded to me immediately on LinkedIn. He was very cordial, very friendly. We've been working a minute to get this set up. We finally got our schedules connected. Shergul, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Ryan. Excited to get the conversation going.
I follow LinkedIn very closely. LinkedIn has been like my primary sales tool probably when LinkedIn was LinkedIn before it was Microsoft. And I rely so heavily on that tool, not only in my own company, but for this as well. And I've got to say, you're the first title I've ever seen in the sport where you are specifically geared stateside here. And I am excited about that. And I immediately had to reach out to you when I did that. I'm so glad you responded. But just to educate the audience, because they probably are not as obsessive about Formula One and LinkedIn as I am, what exactly do you do?
So I'm technically the head of North America. And like you said, it's a new role. I think obviously the passion, the growth that the US and Canadian audience have gone through almost as a necessary byproduct is having more people focus on that region. The types of things I'll be doing range from bringing in new partners, new sponsorships, growing the brand and doing some of the partnership activations on the ground. It could be anything from getting more retail penetration for our merchandise to parties and events and kind of marketing events on the ground. But I think there's a lot of entrepreneurial effort involved, as you were kind of mentioning in the preamble. I think we've got a lot of green space ahead, and we're excited about that because we think that we're sort of a day one, even though it's season 4 of Drive to Survive, as they say. But we think that we're new. We only started a couple of years ago. Even though it's a heritage brand that's been around, and one of the most premium brands of any sort, not just in the car space. We've started just hiring frenzy with regards to top talent, whether it's drivers, technicians, obviously engineers. We'd like to thank the sales and marketing team as well. But we're trying to kind of bring in the best and brightest, and we're a very technology focused company, and the U.S. is full of technology minded companies, as well as premium brands, and sort of a marketer's heaven. And obviously, with the Las Vegas race coming into play next year, the timing of my role is probably tethered to the timing of the race being announced.
That that race is going to be pretty crazy. I'm not a huge fan of Vegas in general, but just the ability to go to a night race with that kind of energy, I'm really, really excited about. And you know, I just went to my actual first race. So 20-year fan, both my wife and I have followed this sport very, very closely. And we went to Coda this year. And, you know, I was
Okay.
like, I've got a crazy experience here at home. You know, why would I go to a race and watch a corner, you know, just in one corner? And it was such an incredible experience to, you know, to do that. But a track like that has so many vantage points of the track. When you're at
Hmm.
one spot, you can see so many parts of it, but the speed at which they slow down and accelerate or speed through a section of turns is unbelievable. The engines aren't what they used to be, but you can hear the wind coming off of the aerodynamic elements. Like, to me, mind blown. I've already committed to every race next year. I just said
Great.
I have to be a part of this and experience this in person. And so it's wild. You mentioned a very entrepreneurial aspect. You know, I've written actually really heavily on, you know, Red Bull, you know, Red Bull being kind of an independent maverick team. You know, they were the kind of the first of their kind. And when Lawrence kind of stepped on to the scene with this vision, his execution was actually quite brilliant. I think, coming from an entrepreneur or somebody that's built business before, to just set the table. I write about the business of Formula One,
Hmm.
and you know, and so I talk about, like, if I was in this position, why would these decisions be happening? And when the concept of Aston Martin's Formula One team came about, you know, I wrote pretty heavily about, you know, driver strategy. Who would I be bringing in as drivers? And I've hit the nail on the head. And just, you know, earlier I was like, you know, if Vettel retires, you know, Alonso would be the perfect choice, you know, because he
Yeah.
fits that strategy, that racing heritage that Formula One has, and Aston Martin specifically. And then the news came out and I was like,
Huh.
yeah, I
You
nailed
should
it.
should have bet on it.
Should have.
Well, you know, I think that's part of the magic and strategy that we've got going on here. You know, he's been a winner. He's a hugely popular athlete, over 10 million social media followers, charm, personality, very global icon. So, you know, Aston Martin, obviously the US is a critical market, but really we're looking at global branding and global growth. So having an icon of the grid being part of our next phase, and we just obviously had an icon where last race coming up with Sebastian Vettel. So, you know, I think when you step into the shoes of recruiting sponsors and partnerships, and having big names, is always a huge plus, you know, to kind of bring the immediate tangible benefits to those partners.
Yeah, I feel like you can come into the sport and create a facade very easily. And I think that people and drivers sniff that out pretty well. And to be able to, at such an early stage, bring in a driver like Seb, you know, and then to take on a driver like Fernando, says a lot about the vision cast within the team.
Mhm.
And, and again, I go back to like execution, because I believe in, it's not what you say, it's what you do. And while he says a lot of this stuff, he actually does it all. And I just think about his 5-year championship goal. Like, is that still like embedded in the DNA of the team? Like, is everybody still fighting for that objective?
Yeah, I mean, look, obviously I'm on the commercial and sort of sales and marketing side of the fence, and we all want to see championships and glory and podiums. Where I can speak to, very clearly is the motivation of everyone I've been lucky enough to meet so far, and everyone is, as you mentioned at the beginning, super impressive talent pool of people, really marching forward to take a position, sort of this premium position where it's not just the Aston Martin brand, it's the caliber of people, but also doing things in a advanced way. So we are now investing 200 million pounds into a new, completely new facility out at Silverstone, which is going to include a new wind tunnel and opportunities for loads of types of partners, including many tech partners, to get involved. Um, that's not something you see in any of the other teams going on. So I think a lot of teams are sitting back and looking at, wow, these guys they're not just new just for the sake of being on the grid, but they're investing in it. They're hiring top talent, hiring top technicians and engineers. Super excited, I think, for the car next year. Again, can't speak to it. I don't think they want me driving the car, Ryan. They've made much better hires in that department. But
Yeah.
I think the excitement I feel, I've spent probably the last decade or so working in soccer and global football. I actually first came in touch with Jeff Slack, who's our managing director, and he's my boss. About 10 years ago, I was working for AS Roma. Um, the fact is, this is that exciting period, and I think largely driven by the recent 4 years, Drive to Survive, and then Miami, followed in succession by Las Vegas, and the many opportunities that is now kind of um, uh, presented to us in the U.S.
You guys are really, really strategic about your partners. I gain the sense that every logo on the car and every partner associated or attached to partnerships is intentional. It's not, oh, you have a check, we'll take it. Oh, you have a check, we'll take it. It's very, very
Right.
intentional. And I
Yeah, I
mean, is
think
that
that's a good observation. It's a very good observation. I mean, look, there's a few teams I won't, downplay or talk down. They will take sort of the any check approach. We have a premium brand and an image, where we know that a brand that gets associated with ours is going to receive a premium brand bump, an awareness bump. In fact, almost all of our existing partners attribute that as one of the key factors, the why Aston Martin Formula One versus another team. It's obviously the investment that's happening in the technology, but also that immediate association with Aston Martin. It's everything from England to James Bond to the best kick-ass cars you've ever seen, and everyone kind of dreams of having one or being a part of it. So if you're Peroni beer and you're associated with Aston Martin, that's an excellent premium brand lift. And we've got, like you said, a series of partners that Cognizant is another one that I think has attributed a lot of ROI success to, bringing in new large consulting partners based on the ability to entertain them at races.
I had Kate Dalton on a
Yeah.
couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about even as far as like TikTok being a partner. Like you guys have the most polished TikTok, honestly, of like most any other brand, but certainly on the Paddock. And you even see it there. Like it's everything is so intentional. Does that make your job difficult and like prospecting?
You know, I wouldn't necessarily say it makes it difficult. It makes it much more focused. And I think, you know, we talked a little bit earlier in the beginning, you know, NASCAR. I think NASCAR is an excellent property that's had years of success. And in many ways, you know, F1 is entering the market in the US, at least in a big way now, where they've had many years. But you know, NASCAR is also associated much more kind of blue collar, potentially kind of southern Midwestern, and maybe a lot of brands, you know, that aren't necessarily Aston Martin, right? What's happened with Formula One is, you know, Drive to Survive has attracted folks like yourself. It's a lot of college educated couples that sat around during the pandemic, didn't know what to watch. And next thing you know, they got hooked on Drive to Survive. Word of mouth starts to spread. You know, it's the most downloaded show on Netflix, or most watched. I think 1 in 6 people in America pretty much has been watching it. Has led to 10x growth in ratings on Formula One races for ESPN, and now, you know, there's loads of brands that are potentially even crossovers that want to do both. You know, ultimately, you know, I firmly believe that a sports fan is a sports fan is a sports fan, and will gravitate towards the best events. So there's no rational reason why somebody would necessarily shut off one to watch the other. But one of the great things F1 has going for it too is we are on at different times, right? So we aren't sort of every Sunday afternoon at 1 p.m. You know, we've got morning races, we've got night races. We're also global as a property. So I think the fan kind of enjoys that aspect of it. And I think, you know, the series has certainly helped amplify that tremendously.
When you think of that growth in the US and North America too, I mean, I would argue to say that any market Formula One has served or is serving is growing. Obviously, growing from like virtually nothing to a lot
Mhm.
is more than you might see in the UK. But as you come onto this North American role, like what is the first order of business for you, and like your objective and execution?
Sure. Yeah, no, I mean, very clearly, I think this is a really exciting time to bring in new sponsors and new partners, specifically because of the growth in new races and specifically in America. But also, there's so many innovative things we can do with a partner. Depending on what your business objectives are, we can help you accomplish them. And that's where the entrepreneurial spirit kicks in. You know, if it's, you know, driving more consumers for Peroni beer, we're doing lots of activation events at the races. If it's consulting partners for Cognizant, obviously it's a lot of the entertainment options that provides. For Sentinel One, we were a part of the IPO for the company. We brought the car and the drivers to the IPO, and obviously that helped in the initial sizzle. And I think, you know, obviously there's each partner's got a different set of objectives. You know, one thing Americans, I think, are staggered by when I say this in a lot of my meetings I'm having so far, this really is like 24 different Super Bowls. So the Super Bowl, all of us who grew up, you know, I grew up in Boston. I'm fortunate to have 6 Super Bowl rings as a Patriots fan. But um, the, you know, that is sort of the premium be all end all with, but globally gets about 110 million viewers. The average F1 race gets 70 million viewers, and the top ones get more than Super Bowl numbers. If you add up all 24, you're talking about 1.55 billion TV viewers. So just think about that for a quick second. And then it's not just a Super Bowl happening 24 times all in, one city in Arizona. We're talking about truly global. So there's a Super Bowl in Singapore and a Super Bowl happening in Abu Dhabi this weekend. And then there's one in Melbourne, Australia and Monaco. So the opportunity, if you're a global brand, a global company, to not just focus things around one, let's say Olympics happening once every 4 years or a World Cup. This is the only thing actually in any sport that is the magnitude as far as TV audience, but also global happening event wise. Austin, Texas had 440,000 people, including yourself, at the race. Those types of numbers happening in all these different cities around the world provides a global company this excellent opportunity to get local people in Tokyo to come to the Tokyo, Japan race, and the folks coming to the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix maybe before going to the World Cup. I mean, there's lots of different reasons why different regions are going to be, capitalizing on the momentum. And I think brands in America who maybe viewed F1 in the past as this European thing on early in the morning, we're NASCAR, are kind of waking up to like, wow, these are the fastest cars, way more technology investments, truly global. This can be a real platform for accelerating our brand messages.
Yeah, I gotta say, I travel quite a bit and run in many circles around the country, and Formula One is beginning to dominate more and more and more of our conversations, and I come from oil and gas. And so, when I would be in Houston and I would run into somebody from London, like at Shell, and, I immediately was like, are you a Formula One fan? It was like I finally had a connection to somebody from a sports perspective. And now it's almost anyone, and I'm meeting more and more people that are just wild, crazy fans, and a lot of them are Drive to Survive fans.
Sure.
I'm a fan because I have young children, and when my son was born in 2007, like, what else do you do when you're feeding your child at 2 o'clock in the morning? It's the only thing on TV before on demand was a thing. And it's like, my son would be asleep and I would just be like, I'd watch a race. And then TiVo came along and it was like, oh wow, I can record it and watch it in daylight. And and it progressed into just for me, a huge obsession. But we have a marketing agency in the family, and so I pick up on social media.
Mm-hmm.
There's such a starvation for content related to Formula One. It's because my journey was, I was bored at work in 2004, and I just I was on ESPN, and you can only read so much sports news before, like in a day, before you're like, yeah, I've got nothing else to look at or do. Back when I was young and dumb and didn't do anything above and beyond what was required of me. And and then I came across this Formula One thing, and the news was like captivating to me. It was like Drive to Survive on paper. And
Yeah.
and I educated myself at formula1.com. And they had all these sections on aerodynamics and tires and drivers and engines and chassis and all this. But for me now, and during the quarantine, I needed to escape from work. And you can only consume so much content when you're stuck at home all day. And so I started writing on the business of Formula One as an escape. And it has exploded because it's an education on the things that you're talking about. It is, this is what's important to business. If I was Lawrence Stroll, this is what I would be doing. If I was anyone in this role, this is why I would make that decision, or why this decision is getting made. And I just, you you do content so well and branding so well, and you articulate things like a global brand. You know, if I'm a global technology company, it makes more sense for me to target Aston Martin in Formula One versus NASCAR. Because if I have clients in London, well, I have to fly them to the US to go to a race
Right.
versus I can fly to Europe and I can have an experience with them on their home
And,
turf.
and I think, ironically, outside of the US, I think pretty much nobody follows NASCAR. I mean, it's not even, no one knows the drivers, no one knows IndyCar. They're very unknown properties. So, a very typical American way, like, um, you know, outside of maybe Tom Brady, like most NFL players can walk any city in the world and be unknown. And we've got baseball and NASCAR and things that are like very US. And so I think if you're a global marketing company, your job should be looking at things that are truly global, or can have a much broader reach. You could be a company that's solely focused in the US right now. We've got expansion plans to Europe and to Asia. Well, what better way to capitalize on these truly global properties? I think, you know, what I've found fascinating is I grew up in Italy my first 11 years of life. So in Italy, you pretty much can't, turn 10 feet without Ferrari, Ferrari, Ferrari. And it, it's ingrained in you. And then I moved to the US. I was an 11-year-old, and like, dark 20 years before, F1 probably, I'd say 10 years later, but like it just wasn't on any newspaper. It'd be maybe a little blurb in the back. It wouldn't make the highlights show on the early days of Sports Center. And it's just incredible to see, but not surprising. Like this is something that it took the brave and smart minds at Liberty Media. I think Drive to Survive was like the perfect timing to, and what you've now seen is people wouldn't have stayed watching if it wasn't a compelling sport. In other words, Drive to Survive, sure, the drama that can be created between drivers, but if they're tuning in and the races they're watching aren't as thrilling or as exciting, and then being able to share that with friends, I think America is now turned on to something that 50 years ago in Florence, Italy, I mean, I knew this was a big deal, right? But it's great to see. So when I say, look, this is 24 Super Bowls happening all around the world, and this is, the most global property out there. Brands, of all sizes, I think are starting to see that. And again, tech has been one of the sectors that has been more heavily invested. You've seen a lot of tech companies on cars as they go by, but I'm convinced it's really any sector that can take advantage of this. It's like, what are your marketing goals? What are you trying to accomplish? Because everyone's trying to sell something more of whatever it is to a certain segment, whether it's a B2B segment or to a consumer segment. And then how can exposure across truly global property help that? It's
Yeah,
that simple.
what's really unique, and I don't think I fully grasp the content of, I guess, the context of sponsorship in general. And I went to the St. Pete Grand Prix with a friend of mine. I advise a young driver working his way up IndyCar, but I also know a sponsor for Andretti. And so I was there, with my wife, just kind of going around the support series, and a friend calls me. He's like, "Hey, are you here? Come check this out." And so the previous night I was at dinner with the driver, and I was like, what is the value proposition for a sponsor? Like when you go to a business or a company and you ask for sponsor dollars, like what are they getting? And he was like, I'm putting them in an environment of business to business transactions. They get to experience the whole like support Paddock, which is way more accessible than the IndyCar level, but what they get is this business to business experience where they're
Yeah,
business owners, other sponsors commingling and doing business together. And I
yeah,
was like, okay, I'm a business owner. I'm coming here and I'm not really here for business.
right.
And I went to the Andretti hospitality and I'm having lunch with the Andrettis and sponsors and all that. And people, like, the only question people were asking is like, what do you do? Here's a business card. What do you do? Here's a
Yeah.
business card. And I had my wife with me with her marketing agency, and I think she got customers from that. And like, and it like clicked for me, and I was like, this is like a this is like a nuclear arsenal of sales tools here, because you're in an environment of extreme passion. This is
No
like
doubt.
sitting in a hunting blind with your best friend,
Yeah, that's a
like,
great analogy. I was actually out with one of my Harvard classmates from years ago, Don Cornwell, last night. He's many years at Morgan Stanley and then PJT Partners. He's been an iBanker in the sports space, and loads of attention now riveted towards Formula One. And his exact point was he's gone to, I don't know, dozens of Super Bowls, and you go there, you have to move around town to different parties, and then there's a game where everyone's focused on the game. And you go to a 3-day event like COTA, the one you went to in Austin, you've got 3 days with hours and hours of course, exciting driving, but also you're with these people in the Paddock Club or down in the Aston Martin paddock, as an example, or some of the other paddocks. And over the course of 3 days, oh, how was your night last night? And you just form a relationship that is inevitably going to lead to business in all kinds of different ways. And we're actually seeing one of the cool things with the Aston Martin partners is that we really foster a lot of partner to partner interactions and events so that the partners get to commingle. So, I think a lot of business is being done between the partners, and that's been a huge accelerator to their ROI as well.
yeah, that's a quick and easy way to make it a viable investment,
Yeah.
not just an experience for the company, but also,
But I've also noticed a migration. I don't know if you've seen this as well. Like some of the brightest sports minds that I've known in the last 20 years, moving into this. So I at Roma, our CEO is a guy named Mark Panis, and now he's running the Austin track at COTA. It's a great job he does every year. One of my business school classmates was Tom Garfinkel, who's good friends with him. He ended up Padres, Diamondbacks, Miami Dolphins, CEO of the Dolphins. Innovation comes up with the idea for the whole Miami Grand Prix, and put on a great show there last year. But he's somebody who 20 years ago was a thought leader in the sports space. Jeff Slack, like I mentioned earlier, he was CEO at Inter. He's done a lot of tech investing and tech startups. And again, he and Lawrence have taken the business from pretty much a startup level just 3 years ago to an incredible growth.
you have a wild acumen for motorsports. Like, what's your origin story? Like, how did you get into motorsports?
So I honestly, I know Jeff. We both live here in London. I was catching up with him earlier in the year, and his passion and excitement and some of the growth stories. I was watching the show. I was actually heading to Imola for my first Grand Prix earlier this year. So even though I'd been a lifelong fan, and when I used to live in Italy and not far from Maranello, so I once went to one of the Ferrari presentations. So having access like that, but then hearing Jeff's passion and knowing some of the smart people I mentioned earlier, like Tom and Mark, who have been in the space, it really kind of got my wheels turning. And I love kind of momentum businesses, growth. I think the role that was presented to me had that right mix of entrepreneurial excitement. So really, how I got into it was a conversation I was very happy as chief commercial officer at StatsBomb. Um, my wife's English, so we've been over here for a couple of years to get out of the pandemic hell. And I've been going to loads of soccer games, and obviously that was a great success story. StatsBomb has grown very strongly in the data field, essentially powering the data and analytics for um, the likes of Liverpool and helping them win championships. And so I always liked the emerging entrepreneurial opportunities, that there wasn't such like cookie cutter, like let's just go do this again. And when Jeff was describing the needs for somebody on the ground in the US, I kind of raised my hand. I mean, the opportunity to be back there. So Boston based, and I've got a big network of people in New York, Silicon Valley, Miami, sort of LA, now St. Louis, Ryan, right? So,
Yes. Yes.
I'd like to think that I'll be, around it, certainly all the different races. And, one thing which is exciting and kind of an opportunity is certainly for the right level CEOs and CMOs and heads of brand, like we love inviting them to races. There's nothing like seeing it and feeling it and experiencing it for yourself. So we reserve kind of a certain number of spots for every race to kind of do that entertaining and prospecting. Because I think that once somebody comes to that first race and they see the types of people they can interact with and the business that they can generate for themselves, the ideas, whether it's a a consumer-oriented party on a beach in Miami, or it's a kind of a private event for CEOs that they're trying to sell to, and anything in between, their ideas start to kind of flow, and we like to meet that.
I think the environment that makes that type of experience powerful, not just from the business to business aspect of it, but I think high performing people are always enamored by other high performing people, and especially in tech and large business, the level of innovation, like when you look at this, it looks cool, but as we talked about earlier in the conversation, when I was standing next to the Aston Martin car at the dealership, the aerodynamic elements that like just sit in the side pod is crazy. I mean, it's about the
Yeah.
only word that I could experience the level of sophistication and innovation that goes into just that kind of like grouping of elements. And the floorboard around the rear wheel is like millimeters. My son
Yeah.
was like, what if they run over a rock? Like, I don't even know if it'll fit through there and like shred up the floorboard. And you almost have this like realization of how powerful and delicate these machines are. And I think anybody with a sense of innovation or disruption in business just immediately like locks in on these things, because the pit crews, the garage, the people, I've not run into one person on this show that is just not locked into winning and performing at the highest levels and on a mission. And to be surrounded by that is incredible. I any CEOs are listening, give this guy a call and go experience it for yourself. You'll mind blown. You'll have your logo on the car in no time. It's
Yeah, I mean,
amazing.
look, we like to think, there's so many other kind of things where in American leagues, NBA, NFL, there's a lot of league control. Obviously, I think we have a lot of team control, which is great. So, for example, you mentioned social media elements too. And we've created a whole host of different bespoke social media campaigns that essentially convey the message for a brand, convey a message to help meet those objectives. It then gets shared globally. Our drivers are part of it. When Tom Brady does a press conference, he's wearing the TB12 hat, right? When Vettel and Stroll are doing press conferences, they're wearing our sponsor logos, and their shirt has our sponsors on there. And that's part of the kind of elements that people really enjoy here. And doing a deal or a partnership with Aston Martin F1, essentially you're part of the team, right? There's a team, there's the engineers, there's the drivers, there's the tech team, there's the sales and marketing, but then there's all of our partners, and we're all kind of sharing that at paddocks, at races around the world.
Yeah, it is. If anybody's listening, it is also the hardest area to access. I went, I told you the IndyCar race, a text message. I'm in the private conference room of the Andretti motorhome. Nothing at Coda. It's like it's on lockdown, and to be able to experience that is actually, to me, a really, really special thing. And anyone listening that ever gets that opportunity, like, latch onto that and take it for a ride, because it is really, really special to go do that. It's kind of like a movie for fans.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure, for those of you that are watching or have watched Drive to Survive, when they walk through the corridor and there's sort of paddock after paddock, I mean, trailers of cars and the drivers, and pretty much everyone's walking through there. At Austin, I think Brad Pitt's walking by, and then the drivers are walking by, and legends of the sport and TV personalities and sponsors are all kind of walking up and down an avenue. But there's a huge difference in the experience that you get within each of those paddocks. So each one of the, and then the buildings that get created, or the paddocks that in Europe, I think there's a lot of actual caravans where you can go inside. The experience that the teams bring to life, Aston Martin is, and Kate probably told you better than I can, the premium experience. You want to walk in there and feel like you're getting, the best food and the best kind of furnishings, and the feel of being in a premium place. And we've had loads of people who've maybe visited others and come back and said, no, this is the one we want to be at. This is the place we want to hang out in, is the Aston Martin paddock.
You're the James Bond of the paddock. I want
Hey,
everybody to feel like they're in a $10,000 suit.
We're looking for the next James Bond, Ryan. So you might have to step in.
No, I don't have the accent for it. That's you.
I don't either.
Maybe Kate will do it for us.
Yes.
Does your role give you experience to the track? I mean, are you going to races and kind of getting to experience that yourself, or at least work with partners?
Yeah. So, the role certainly will. My first or second week on the job, I was out at Silverstone, when, first off, it's incredible how our offices, our headquarters, are across the street from British legends, right? This is the track. This is the one place is kind of, there's a bunch of different teams that are headquartered nearby, but we're the only one that's in Silverstone and right across the street. And so having this new center that's being built up is incredible. But the day I went there, they were doing some test drives and test laps for the media. And, I just went down there to kind of meet some of the people on the team and talk about potentially US events and track days and driving around. And Nico Hulkenberg is in there, and he's kind of eating a banana and talking to people, and he's just super sociable guy, and wish him the best of luck next year. And then they had the new 707 DBX, and they were going to take some hot laps of people around with an experienced driver, not some schlep like me. And they asked me if I wanted to pop in the car. So I said, that sounds like pretty fun. And so I'm being taken around Silverstone, and man, I was scared, and I wasn't even driving, but you get the experience, a fraction of the speed. and then you just get a total appreciation of what these guys are doing and the reaction times are doing this in, and sometimes in bad weather and poor visibility. It's just absolutely mind-boggling. And then as far as going to events, yeah, I mean, I think, next year, all the US races and Montreal and a couple of the other ones, certainly kind of on the bucket list is the Monaco Grand Prix. So I'm hoping Jeff hears that. That's plug for the Monaco Grand Prix.
Are you contained primarily to North America, Canada, US?
Yeah, Ryan, contained is a tough word. I mean, come on, we're all citizens of the world here. I'd like to think that I'd like to view this much more as bringing US and American companies to the world, and vice versa. I mean, there's going to be global brands that want access to the races in the US, and I think over time, we're just at day one as far as staffing up the US, and what we can do. But remember, like we're relatively new team. We took over the Force India operations a few years ago, and the amount of turnaround and kind of rebranding of everything has been an incredible rise, and we view ourselves as still very much day one, and what's going to happen next year and the year after is just really thrilling. So partners and fans who join us now really are part of a journey. We view this as like an exciting journey, and that they get to come in at the beginning, right? And they get to experience what it's like to build up, and to a winning team. So that's really kind of an exciting part along the way, with the name Aston Martin associated with it.
By the way, that would have been my exact answer to my boss to justify trips all over the world as the head of North America. You have to unite everyone. Come on,
Unite
guys.
everybody. Yes. Although I don't think my wife wants me schlepping off to 24 different races, or that would lead to much chaos. It is one of those things where people don't really, can't probably fathom the amount of travel some of the folks do on our team. We have a partnership team, we've got events team, we've got obviously all the people in the garage and technicians and engineers. They're going from pretty much end of February until end of November. And it's like, who's your family? It's the people at the track.
I had Seb's trainer on the show 2 weeks ago, and we were talking specifically about that because I travel a ton, and 2023 is going to be another ramp up year for travel for me. And we were specifically going through, the travel regimen of just jet lag reduction and being able to perform and adjust to time zones. And, I think people forget that, I don't care if you're on a private jet or a commercial jet, it's still travel, or a hotel versus my house. Like I'll always pick my house, and my wife next to me, my dog, my kids in the morning. Like it's hard, and you have to do a lot of really, really intentional things to be able to keep up with that. It's going to be an interesting year next year for the sport. I think that's the most races they've ever had.
Yeah, I mean, I think the exciting thing is the growth, and everybody rises with the high tide, so to speak, right? So yeah, the amount of eyeballs flowing in directly translates to money, and obviously there's a lot of sensitivity to tough business things that are happening in the economy and in the world. So all of us, I think, feel very lucky to be part of something that is growing and rising and exciting. But at the same time, I think, a huge part of Aston Martin's mission and is around inclusivity. We do a lot of things around to support anti-discrimination. We do a lot of things that are very progressive on the people front, on gender inclusion. And I think part of that is the sensitivity to everything that's happening in the world out there. So, we're one of the brands that people can associate to that also is doing a lot of things for the environment. Obviously, that's been a big point of contention in general with F1, but a lot of things that we're doing, this new technology center, kind of the green edict that is coming forth in that is really kind of shining through. And so I think a lot of the corporate folks out there, they want to associate with somebody that's doing good for the world, whether it's through the environment or for people and inclusion and um, diversity, are really kind of gravitating towards us as well.
You know what I think I love about this sport, from exactly that, the diversity, the inclusion is at this level, it is a meritocracy. It has to be a meritocracy. And I think the only way that you can achieve true meritocracy, and we're not talking like, are you the best calculus student in the engineering class, but are you that, but also are you creative? Can you work around the rules? Can you think outside of the box? But to truly have that, you can't just say like, we're only white men, because my wife is way smarter than I am. And, like, I think that you really have to like put that out. And I think Formula One is doing a really, really good job of that now. And I mean, they probably have been for quite a while. I think it's really, really noticeable now. I'd beg to say 75% of the people that I talk to on this show are women. And, and they're not like a janitor, these are the heads of whatever role that is within the team. And I think that is a true testament to the sport, not only talking about it, because look, as well as I do, in the business world, it's really easy to talk about that stuff and not do it. And people just, they're like, oh, they're talking about it, so they must be doing it. The sport's actually doing it. You guys are doing it. I pick up on that on LinkedIn all the time.
Well, I mean, just to use my own wife as an example, lawyer, works for Sienna Blue Planet, and she doesn't watch NFL and with me, and pretty much hates on the soccer games that I watch. But one day I was like, listen, I think you'd like this. And we turn on Drive to Survive, and she's the one who's hooked on it and saying like, let's watch the next episode, and I'll stay up another hour later. And, now she's asking me about qualifying, and we'll watch the races together. So, I think when this role kind of materialized, I think having her support and push and, the move back to the US, I think it's all tethered to the fact that loads of very intelligent, motivated, smart people of all genders and races are flocking to it as well.
Yeah, my wife and I have always talked about, I love this sport, and of course, I can't get too involved in it now just because I have teenagers, but we have talked like, what do you want to be when you grow up? Like when we're empty nesters, and it was like, I'm going to be in the sport, and I envision a time when you and I are traveling the world, going to races for, whatever that role is. I don't know. I'd love to be a team boss. I love the pressure and the chaos and everything that goes with that. It's like my happy place. Like when it's calm and relaxed, I actually am quite uncomfortable. And so, but whatever that role is, I do see, maybe it's a path where the sport can start pulling in family members to kind of alleviate some of that travel stress. Because I don't really know if the A team, B team works, with a rigorous schedule like that, because I do think that people generally, I don't know, you look at baseball players, and they have to adjust each shoulder. It's like this this ritual that they have. I think, there some of that probably resides in motorsports too. And so it is such a family sport. When I was at COTA, there were families there, there are husbands, there are wives, there are boyfriends, girlfriends, there are kids, and I know my kids, we are mapping out a schedule for the 3 races for next year, where my wife goes to a race, my son goes to a race, and my daughter goes to a race, just because they're all.
Are you the constant in all 3? Are you going along for all?
I have this.
No,
I
I mean,
have to
listen,
be,
yeah, exactly. It's work, man.
It is.
We'll look forward to meeting up at those and St. Louis and other opportunities. I mean, Montreal, don't forget that one. That's massive and has great heritage and pretty accessible as well.
Yeah, I definitely am going to start out in the US, and I probably will definitely acclimate. I have a huge Italian family, and I know we are also working on a trip to kind of combine going to see family as well as obviously a race.
Yeah.
The Temple of Speed. But yeah, I'm the constant. We're gonna go. I think one time before we die, we want to go to every race in the season. Just kind of follow the motorhome. I don't know if we have time for that. Grandkids will probably come before that, and we'll find another reason to stick around. And
you chalk up your freaking flyer miles at that point too.
Yeah, I'm still burning through them from 2019. I mean, I've traveled most of my career, and I've learned to travel well. But so just kind of in wrapping up for the glitz and glam end of it, like, what's been your pinch me moment and being with the team? I know you probably mentioned going around the track, but what?
I've literally only been here a month, but I'd say the pinch me moment was the race I went to in Imola, which was, a few months back. And I think the pinch me moment was it's like 10 minutes before the start of the race. And I'm in the actual garage with the partner services, guest services team led by Jessica Clayton that day. And it starts to rain. And we're standing like 10 feet away from Vettel and Stroll's cars. And they both come in and, visible. I think every team on the grid is probably going through similar stress, because you're talking about switching out parts of the livery and parts of the tires, and they're looking at stuff on screens that I couldn't even tell you what they're looking at. But I'm like, this is, the analogy I'd give is sort of like being, playoff game in the NFL. You're in the locker room and it's like 10 minutes before, and the coach is going through kind of the game plan, and you can't do that in any other sport. So being inside a garage before a major Grand Prix just 10 minutes before, and major changes are happening because of weather changes, that was pretty much a pinch me moment. And I think that everyone who is in our partnership group and sponsorship group and part of the team, that has experienced way more things like that, that's just kind of one of those thrills. And you're really, when I say you're part of the team, like you're literally part of even the minutes right before a Grand Prix or right after a Grand Prix, right there face to face.
That to me sounds fun.
Both drivers got points that day, so I brought luck. There we go, Ryan.
Do it again. You tell Mike, say, every time I'm in the garage, we score points. You're the team boss.
Yeah, exactly.
Man, I really appreciate you coming on here. Like I told you when we started here, I'm like looking at my notes, and I feel like we could just sit and unpack each of these even deeper. And anytime that you are in St. Louis, send me an email. I will take you out for a cup of coffee. And there's lots of amazing places here in St. Louis, especially where you would be. And definitely connect and unpack some of this stuff, or hang out at a race.
Sounds great. No, it's love that city, and my son's at Wash U. I mentioned that, so I'll be there quite a bit in the next 2.5 years while he's still there.
Is he following in his mother's footsteps with law school?
Oh no, no, he's actually social media guy. Like he wants to do, TikTok and content production. So I actually was the head of digital at Roma running a social media team. So maybe that inspired him, but who knows?
Hey,
He's also
yeah,
19.
we have a social media fastest growing in St. Louis. So
There you go.
if he needs internships or a job when he graduates, you send me an email. I
I might take you up on that.
they manage all my, so I just do this and then I file it up and send it off, and they manage it all, and the guy that does it is a huge IndyCar fan, so when I get an IndyCar guest on here, he goes nuts. And
Right.
so it would be nice to have a Formula One fan and Formula One connections inside the business. So
Yeah. Well, yeah, one of my earliest exposures into motorsports was one of my best friends was the head of marketing at IndyCar, Ivan Cropper, and took me to the 100th running of the Indy 500. So I got to experience that as well. And then, completely different scale is now seeing what the Grand Prix are around the world. So, I think obviously that's the crown jewel of the IndyCar season. And then to see that's their Super Bowl, right? But the
yeah,
other races, and then you see 24 Super Bowls. Like it's like an Indy 500 every weekend with, kind of the global engine that comports. So
with, by the way, the best fans, hands down. We were at Coda, and around turn one, right before the race start, is like shoulder to shoulder fans standing up, you know, against the fence. And everybody is so nice. They step out of the way if you're trying to get through, nobody's complaining, nobody's freaking out, and everyone is cheering. Everyone is cheering everyone. And it's like fans of motorsport attend these events versus like, rabid Max fans or Vettel fans or whoever.
yeah.
They love the environment that they're in.
Yeah, I
So
mean, one of the interesting things I've found too is that if you sponsor, I don't know, the Yankees, well, all the Red Sox fans are going to hate you, right? And I think the totally different thing that's happening with, like you said, this spirit of camaraderie amongst even the drivers, but also it's almost viewed like a traveling rock concert or circus that packs up and goes to another city, and the stars are these 20 drivers that you've seen on Drive to Survive. And, it's not necessarily that people, especially in America, didn't grow up lifelong fans of one team or another. So, really it's guys like myself, their job is to kind of impress you, like why you should care and why you should show more passion towards one team versus another. And I think, the more things that we can do that are, environmentally conscious or inclusive of people of all backgrounds, the more things we can do. Like you said, the social media and quality of production, the brand, what we stand for, winning, all those things will help us get to that objective.
yeah, and Formula One will do it. You mentioned it before. Liberty Media has done a stellar job of taking this behemoth and just throwing gasoline on it. I mean, I loved Bernie and what he did for the sport, and just kind of his wily entrepreneurial attitude. But Liberty Media has really, really taken the reins and made it something powerful and something for people like me to just kind of, latch on and have a very, very unique fan experience. Not every day we get to talk to the head of North America for Aston Martin and make a friend in the process. And a coffee drinking partner and
There we go.
just enjoy. So, man, I again, I really appreciate it. You are always welcome on the show. Anybody in your team is welcome. Aston Martin as a whole has been just absolutely a stellar organization for me, because you guys have been so accessible for me and coming on the show. And you know, that's a rare thing for very, very busy people to do, is to take the time and engage the fan base. So I
Thank you for
appreciate it.
having me. Appreciate it.
Enjoy.
Okay. Well, thanks, Ryan.